Now let's start the conversation. Pastor?
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Conversations with the Pastor. And the only thing that's going to make that statement true is if you let your fingers do the walking across the keys on your keyboard and send in your questions, your comments as you hear and reflect upon what you hear from today's guests and what I promise you is going to be a thoughtful, provocative, and helpful show. Tonight, we want to talk about the impacts and anticipated impacts of the Trump agenda on the social safety net and what it means to people who serve the most vulnerable populations in our local community, even here in the Puget Sound area. So I'm going to dispense with my normal monologue. I want to get right to it because I've got three fabulous, outstanding guests. One who is in historic appointment to the YMCA here in the Puget Sound, and that is Loria Yaden, President, CEO of the YMCA, who's all the way over on the East Coast, so it's very late there, and I'm appreciative of her time and availability. But we also have the president and CEOs of the urban leagues of both Seattle and Tacoma. We have Michelle Merriweather of the Seattle Urban League and Desiree Wilkins Finch of the Tacoma Urban League. That's a whole lot of brain power we got on the stage today, two in person and two remotely. And Ms. Finch is also on East Coast time. So ladies, I hope you had a stiff cup of coffee so you could still be bright and alert past 9 p.m. East Coast Standard Time. Ladies, welcome to Conversations with the Pastor.
Thank you, Pastor. Good evening.
Thank you, Pastor.
To start with, because I did have a little home training, you always let folks introduce themselves. So why don't I start with Loria? Just tell us an overview of what the YMCA does, because I can't assume everybody knows what it does. And then Michelle and Desiree, can you guys let folks know in just kind of high 30,000-foot level what the Urban League does as it is relative to this conversation, and then we can kind of drill down from there.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and the invitation this evening, Reverend Braxton, and to my fellow members who are on this call. It's good to be with you. I'm Loria Yaden. We'll celebrate in just a few weeks my 6th year as the president of the organization in Seattle, even before Seattle was incorporated. So we have been part of the social safety net in the greater Seattle community for a long, long time, offering services from meals to helping people take care of their health, to child care, to providing transitional housing for hundreds of youth and young adults who are homeless every single night in the greater Seattle area, including camp and so many other things. We are there for youth and families, whatever the needs are. And we love locking arms with others in community to step up to meet those needs, whatever they might be. So that's a little bit about the why. And if you haven't come in, you should come in to explore what we do. We are so much more than the swim and gym that most people talk about.
Yeah, they do talk about to like the Boy Scouts and so forth. And that was part of the network of social services that allowed my mother to go back to work when she had 5 kids that she couldn't afford daycare for after school. The Y was part of the after-school programming that kept us off the streets. So the Y is near and dear to my heart. Michelle and Desiree, tell us a little bit about the Urban League and what the Urban League does.
Absolutely. I'll start and then I'll pass it to my sister. That's all right. The Urban League in Seattle is 95 years old this year, with an emphasis on the needs of Black folks. We serve everyone. We don't discriminate, certainly, but our programs are created by request or mandate from our community in the areas of housing, workforce development, education, and certainly advocacy. We serve about 5,000 to 6,000 folks annually in those key areas, making sure that their needs are met, that they're able to survive and thrive in this region. And our programs have changed certainly over the years to meet the needs of where we are right now. But anything from supporting those that are experiencing homelessness to purchasing a home or to save your home and foreclosure prevention, as well as getting folks a job, helping small businesses, and making sure that our children are supported and uplifted through mentorship, through educational attainment, and the like. So we do a lot, but all to address the needs of our community.
Desiree?
The same. We just do it in Tacoma. I think we were founded about 1968. Thomas Dixon was our first president, founder, and I believe one of the first presidents to own its own building in the Urban League affiliate, among the Urban League affiliates. And so some of our programs are designed. We have housing navigators that we partner with Habitat for Humanity. We have a business drop-in service. We have programs for family and youth and children. And that's exactly the same thing that Michelle said. We are there to serve the community. We do not turn anyone away. And I've been there for about 3.5 months now. And when I tell you those doors are full of our community, full of our partners, it's a vibrant threshold that people get to cross into and just have access to resources. And that's something that I'm personally passionate about is access to resources. And so we're in the process of creating new partnerships, building partnerships so that we can serve more people because we know what's ahead. And so it is important that we are flexible, aware, and prepared to serve. And that's what we're in the process of doing. One of our focus right now is really strengthening our infrastructure so that we can serve even more people. We're doing some upgrades to our building, to our technology, so that we can serve.
Okay, so we're now 9 days in to the second Trump presidency, and he has hit the ground running, as they say. I expected this tenure to be challenging and bad, and the way he started, I think it's going to be worse than we could even have imagined. In terms of erosion of hard-fought gains and re-landscaping American society so it is as inequitable as he and his legions can make it. This morning, Loria sent me something that was distributed from the National Council of Nonprofits under the title of Executive Orders Affecting Charitable Nonprofits. And I would have reviewed it, Loria, as I said I was going to, but I decided to run into my own garage door this afternoon, which kind of rescheduled my last couple of hours. So I have not had a chance to review it, but you all are familiar with this stuff. We're all in the not-for-profit world.
Yes.
How have these initial rollouts, and while some of them are going to end up in court cases, and intentionally so, to challenge what are going to be the executive powers versus when it bleeds over into the Senate? Is the Senate going to be rolled? I think part of what Trump is doing, try to redefine the office of the presidency with the broadest executive powers that we've probably ever had. That said, what do we anticipate are going to be the impacts in terms of funding sources and our abilities to do our job? What are you all anticipating from what you've seen in just the first 9 days? Anyone?
Well, I'll say this. I'll start with this anyway, because we have a long way to go. But his goal is to spark fear, confusion, and turmoil. He fosters on that. His cabinet fosters on that. Our role is to create calmness, security, and safety, which we have done, all of our organizations have done historically and will continue to do. So I'll start there. Loria and I, when we first came in, she talked about her place of zen. It is our responsibility. We have to be the calm in this storm. Just like we were in his first administration and through COVID, we were the place of safety and security through this chaos. What we don't know is how deep it's going to be. Yes, it is scary. Yes, it is fearful. And he is trying to create the disruption of our government as we know it. And will he be able to? We don't know. But what we do know is that we're here. We were built for times such as this. Our churches were built for times such as this. And as our favorite poet laureate said, Kendrick Lamar said, "We gonna be all right." You know, we gonna be all right. We just gotta buckle up for the ride. It's gonna be bumpy. It's gonna be scary. But if we're gonna get through it, we have to know that we are bigger than these fears.
We know that certain people don't even believe in the idea, the concept of a social safety net. They would just assume let certain folks fall through the cracks because they're assuming they're the folks that don't matter to them. And a lot of it, rather than argue the idea philosophically, they just try to cut off funding. So part of this is a funding game. So what happens to the Y? What happens to the Urban League if critical funding is deprived? What then will happen? What will your organizations do? Because the organizations obviously receive meaningful federal funding.
So the Tacoma Urban League, you know, when I first heard of it, you know, I've only been here for about 3.5, maybe 4 months, and I lose track of time. But you know, I text we have a new accountant who is functioning as a CFO, and I texted him first thing in the morning and said, how does this affect us? And we won't directly be deeply affected by some of the cuts that are happening, but we are aware that because of it, there will be an influx of folks going after the same funding, individual funding sources and state funding. And so I think this is a great time to say to those wonderful people, it's already been challenging. It's already been hard. It's already been restricted. It's already been challenging it's already been reimbursements, right? And so I think this is a great opportunity to nudge those folks. And this is their time to be held accountable. And accountability takes trust and it takes transparency. And we have to say, ouch. We have to say, stop. We need access to funding so that we can strengthen the infrastructure of our organization so we can serve. We need funding so we can hire even more talented folks, because we're going to have to strategize. We're going to have some out-of-the-box approaches, the same way we did during COVID. One of the beautiful things that happened in Tacoma in COVID, I'm not saying it didn't happen in Seattle or Renton anywhere. I'm just saying what I saw in Tacoma. Okay. What I saw in Tacoma was there were school buses all over the city, and all you had to do was walk up to one of those school buses, and they asked you one question, and that question was, how many bags of food do you need? And those are the types of activities and ways and out-of-the-box ways that we're going to have to be able to continue to serve our community. So, ouch. But we've been here before. You know, it's our history. This is a part of I'm talking about our history, right? That we have to show resiliency. We have to show creativity. We have to show vibrancy, because just as Michelle said, he thrives on chaos. And it is our job to create calm, to create sustainability, to create systems that people don't feel overwhelmed by, but that they feel held by. That they know that when they come to us, that they're going to get clarity, they're going to get served, and they're going to get a sense of belonging.
Beautifully said. If I could pile on to what my sisters have already said, I double down on what they said by also reminding people that, yes, we all will be impacted in one way or another. And even those who thought they wouldn't be impacted,
That's right,
they're seeing now they will be affected. We are all a connected community. So make no mistake, if one of us is impacted, all of us will be impacted in some way. It might be delayed, but we all will. What I have noticed, and by the way, we're a large nonprofit in Seattle. And if you read the executive orders, one of the orders is for each department to pick 9 large nonprofits or alliances or organizations to scrutinize more closely. And so I'm guessing that a lot of us as large nonprofits will be under even greater scrutiny than we have in the past. What does that do? Yes, we have about 11 million of our funding that's either direct or indirect from federal sources. But what is happening now, what it does, it causes distraction. Mm-hmm. It causes disruption. That's right. Everybody's distracted from the work. Payments get slowed down. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, some people went into the Medicaid system, they could not bill. It's the disruption of the work. And I think we know what happens when there's a disruption or if you're not getting paid. You cannot sustain staff. You cannot offer services. So I think it's less about the funding being cut off. It's more about the threat to the funding, just enough for there to be a disruption, just enough for people who are coming for those services to feel like, gee, if I show up for these services, am I going to be arrested? Are my kids going to be impacted? It's enough of a question and enough fear and enough distraction that it's disruptive to service to community. Mm-hmm. And that's why I have made a point of being really calm and being really focused and being that example in our community. You said it well, Desiree. We have to be the example of calm. We have to be the example of focus. We have to be the example of hope and optimism for what's to come. Why? Because we've always done this. We've had to do this. We know how to do this, and we will. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm experiencing right now, Pastor, if that answers your question.
It does. When I think about it, in a sense, what we're experiencing is a form of state terrorism. Mm-hmm. Terrorism is, by definition, is when you use fear as a tactic toward one's political goals and objectives. Now, we tend to think of terrorist groups as being transnational groups or violent groups out there, but we've also seen state terrorism in many instances. I mean, definitely the worst case of it was Hitler, was state terrorism. But state terrorism happened in this country against our people for hundreds of years. But this is also state terrorism. You are inflicting fear into systems and processes to where people are now, what is driving their decisions and their actions and their behaviors is based upon fear. Mm-hmm. And it's quite intentional. It's maniacal, really. And so I think the question, people don't know what's going to work. Are they going to be able to draw down Medicaid payments? Are they going to get their Social Security payments? Should I go to school? Can ICE come into this place and all of that? So as a service provider, what are you saying to your staff, to your people in this environment of uncertainty? Are people calling you saying, do I still have a job? Do I report to work? Do I plan for our spring programming? Should I start making budget reductions? Yada, yada. What are you hearing from your folks in this environment where every day there seems to be another layer of discouragement thrown out there?
Yeah. The first thing I will say is that we are American citizens. Born here for sure, and we deserve the protections of our government. We pay into that. And so the first thing I will say is that we have to hold the folks that we elected accountable. So if we need to fill up this church and hold Coach, now to advocate for yourself, we will do that. Mm-hmm. And we probably need to do that to make sure that we are teaching folks how to advocate for ourselves, both here in Olympia, which we are in a blue bubble here, and what we do know is that many of our elected officials are doing what they can to protect us.
I
Our
think as
governor,
Washingtonians, we're in a better place
we are in a much better
than our
place.
folks in some other states.
Absolutely. So that's one thing that we do have going for us, that we have AG Nick Brown and Governor Ferguson that are doing the hard work to make sure that we have some protections in place and hit the ground running from day one, even before. So we have to teach our community and make sure that they know how to advocate for themselves, and making sure that we're making phone calls to our elected officials in Washington, D.C., so they hear from us directly on what we need them to do to stand up against this. Second, for our employees, the day after the election, I had a scheduled phone call with all of our staff, regardless of the outcome. Some of our team are in fear for their families. Some of them are in fear for our friends and neighbors, and certainly I am too. While we don't know what we don't know, we all have the fear of the unknown. What we do know is, like somebody said, we've been here before. We're gonna do all we can to protect our communities. We're gonna show up every day, just as we did in COVID. I will say, my fear, what kept me up at night during COVID, was that my team showed up every single day on how we can serve and how we can protect our friends and neighbors. And I was worried about how we're going to protect the people that are showing up to do the work every day. And that's still what keeps me up at night. But what I do know is that we have a team that is dedicated, regardless of the impact on us. We're going to show up for our community every single day, as long as we can, on a shoestring budget if we have to. And we do, because we don't know what's coming down the pipeline, we do have to tighten our belts and make sure that we are operating efficiently and effectively, which we do anyway. Mm-hmm. We have to continue to do that. And we have to also make sure that we are building those relationships so that we're not doing this work on our own or in silos. We have to know how to reach out to our fellow organizations that they might have the resource to do something that we can't, so we can, pick up the slack and have each other's back. We have to operate as a community, as we did in COVID, as we did during the civil rights era, and as we will do now.
Let me ask you, go ahead, Desiree.
I was just gonna say I agree 125%. I believe in Attorney Nicholas Brown, Bob Ferguson, right? We elected these folks, right? And I don't want to get into a voter registration debate by no stretch of imagination, but I am an organizer. Yeah. That's what I've knocked doors in over 25 states in this country, right? And I have a dream of knocking every door in Tacoma, connecting people to resources, but not for voter registration, because what we do in voter registration is we just want folks to show up to vote. And then that's it, right? I've knocked doors. I've had these conversations. I've sat on stoops. I've sat at kitchen tables. I've sat on couches just to get your vote. What we have to do is have a commitment to change people's lives. We have to connect people. If we're on knock doors, we have to connect people directly to the needs that they have. We may have to get into some grassroots stuff, and I'm okay with that. I can't even tell you right now what my budget really is. I can't do that right now, right? So as my father would say, whatsoever it is, we have to be ready to serve. We have to be ready to roll up our sleeves, as we have been in the past, and get into the grassroots of the needs of our people. We have to serve that's just my opinion. We have to serve people's direct needs. And I appreciate, I don't want to slander any voter registration drives. I thank you for your service and all that you do, but you're not changing people's lives. We're not going back. We're not following up. We're not seeing how people's lives have changed because we voted certain folks into office. We got to close it up, and we can't be in this scared. We can't be in this with fear. We have to be in this with awareness, and we have to be alert. And we have to be ready to pivot so that we can serve the people.
It seems you're talking about civic engagement beyond election cycles.
That's right.
People staying engaged.
We should be starting now.
Civic duty. Really talking about the lifestyle of activism.
Yes.
That we can never afford to rest. We know the default position of this country. It's inequity. It's exclusion. and we've been prodding this nation to be counterintuitive.
Yep.
And that's why when you have to fight this hard, lose this many lives, march this many miles to do what you said on paper at the beginning, then that says it's in the nature of this nation. This nation has never done right by people without being forced.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so that pressure must stay on.
That's right.
But that said, if critical federal funding dries up, are there other places to secure and replace that funding? Are there, from private sector, individuals, does it spawn conversations with you as leaders of these organizations to begin to talk with people who may be well-resourced but also benevolent?
Yes, if I can jump in real quick, that's
Sure.
one of the, prior to starting at CEO of the Urban League, I've been a consultant for many years, but, being a consultant and working with folks like Michelle and working with folks like Miss Loria. Is it Loria? I want to make sure I said it right.
Gloria.
Loria, my apologies, like Miss Loria. I learned the struggle that many executives and nonprofit leaders were experiencing. And so started a fund called the Tacoma Black Fund. And just through my social network, we raised $50,000 last year using a 100 by 100 model. And we put $50,000 in the hands of Black folks in Tacoma that are running programs, running businesses that directly impact Black folks in Tacoma. Now, I'm not saying that that's the model, but I'm saying it's a model that's working. And so if that's what we have to do, get back to that type of grassroots fundraising, I think my community is ready for it because we're doing it.
I think the Black church has been a model. Look, when we needed to meet needs in the church, there was nothing for the sisters in the church to have a fried chicken dinner or fried fish or you name it. And it's $1 here or $1 there. But, when all hands are on deck and people rally around a need, we can meet it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are people who will walk alongside if they see us walking, if they see us exhibiting that resilience, if they see us not accepting no or moving ahead even though funding is being cut. We have to be the ones being the example, standing in the gap. Others will follow. We have to get out there, like you said, Desiree, we have to ask, we have to bring people in, show them the need. People will be willing to walk alongside. I'm standing on that. But even if they are not, we've managed to get a lot done with a little.
Yeah.
And we are standing on that. We're going to use every dollar that we have to the best of our ability to serve. Our mission remains the same. Our equity statement remains the same. Our values, who we are as an organization, our commitment to service has not changed. So we will continue to serve with every dollar that we have to meet needs in community.
That's right. Yes and amen to my sisters. We'll go back to our grassroots. Yes, we are a medium-sized, doing well, a well-funded organization now, and we don't get as much of our funding through the federal government as we once did. However, the funding that we do have passed through to us that serve from the federal government serve our most marginalized residents, friends, and neighbors, those that are experiencing homelessness. And I do believe that when we are in need, there will be people that walk alongside us. There'll be certainly people that try to block us, but our efforts, our mission, are bigger than those that are trying to harm us or fight us or stop us. And we'll make it through. We'll go back to how we raised money before. We didn't always receive government support on serving us. The government at one time was against us. It seems like they're preparing to do that again. And we made it then, and we'll make it now. This organization did not survive 95 years because the government wanted us to be here.
Yeah.
We survived because the community recognized the need. And that means all of our community. And we'll band together again.
Well, I know here in the Pacific Northwest, where we have been the epicenter of the global revolution in information technology.
That's right.
And so some of the wealthiest people on the planet, with a sense of social consciousness, are in this area. My hope and prayer is that some of those folks
Yes.
will step forward at this time,
Yes.
and feel called, even if they don't believe in the God up there.
Yeah.
They, if they want to call it higher power, I don't care what they call it, as long as they write the check. So I heard an old preacher years ago when he was asked in a meeting, would they accept money from the gambler, the drug addict, and the streetwalker if they put it in the plate? And he said, absolutely, the devil had that money long enough. So wherever it comes from, it spends the same when put to the right task. But I'm hoping that I believe that there is goodwill among people who have been well-resourced, that they're not all the Elon Musk and the Jeff Bezos and the Mark Zuckerberg and those folks who are selling their souls for access to the Oval.
Yeah.
But that said, could we find ourselves in a conundrum where some of the actions of this current administration increase the demand for the services
Absolutely.
of the Urban League, of the YMCA, and at the same time, when the resources are going down, that we could be in that double hit, that double conundrum? And how would we strategize to deal in that crucible when we're literally being pulled apart?
Can I just ask Michelle and Desiree, I don't know about you two, but I've seen needs escalating even through and continuing to escalate even after the pandemic.
That's right.
So, and I've seen more people coming in asking for financial assistance than ever before. And this was before the election. So we have seen this increase and we've been having to respond to that. So we're expecting that increased need to continue, especially as resources that previously were available to people. We're talking about Obamacare. We're talking about Medicaid. We're talking about all of these other things that, according to the executive orders, are being reevaluated or have already been shut down. So that will put more pressure on families who today can't afford childcare to ask the bigger question, well, if I couldn't afford it before, what am I going to do now? So I think we will see an even bigger increase in need than we've ever seen before.
What I hope, Pastor, is that just as they had their Project 2025, and we knew this playbook, we come up with our own playbook to combat this, to band together, and not sure to combat them. I think that our elected officials and those in DC, that is certainly their job, but that we come together to come up with a plan and a strategy to support our most marginalized communities together. Like that we make sure that nobody loses their home, that nobody goes hungry, that every child has access to care, that every senior has access to health care. That is, we gotta take care of each other. We gotta take care of ourselves. And we can't expect that others are gonna do it for us. So I think my hope is that, and I think my frustration the last 9 days, as folks are online talking about boycotting these big corporations or other things, is what is our strategy? What is our plan? What is our collective we? What are we going to do as a collective we to combat this? And Michelle can't do it on her own. Urban League can't do it on our own. It has to be a collective we. We need to sit down in a room, in each room, in every city, to come up with our collective plan, put that together, and we'll win. And even if they're doing whatever they're going to do, we will make sure, at minimum, that those that we are serving and that we are charged with the care of are protected and safe and fed and clothed and housed. Like, if we just come up with our own strategy to take care of our own, as we have done before, we'll be okay.
Those of you who are out there, we encourage you to send in your questions. We have these three great public servants and great minds and social thinkers here with us tonight. What an opportunity to have your questions, your concerns responded to and answered by these three great leaders. One of the things that we know is going to be the aim of Trump and his administration is closing doors of access, the levers of rise, which we know things like DEI, affirmative action. These were the tactics to corrective measures for centuries of intentional exclusion, de facto and de jure. So by creating opportunities so that there was some meat and meaning to phrases like equal opportunity, because racism is the default affirmative action for white folks in general, and white males in particular. But also not only blocking access, but funding, drying up funding. One of the most critical people around Trump is Stephen Miller, who was with him in his first administration. And Stephen Miller, while his family is a Jewish migrant family who 2 generations ago, if they were subject to the laws they're putting in place now, never would have made it out of Russia here. But Stephen Miller, in his mid-30s now, was listening to Rush Limbaugh in the 80s. He met David Horowitz. David Horowitz is one of these rabid white supremacists who took notice of young Stephen Miller. His intellectual references go to people like Madison Grant, who wrote the book in 1912, The Dying of the Great Race. It was part of the whole racial eugenics, that the Nordic races were superior. Adolf Hitler says that he framed his Aryan supremacy off of the writings of Madison Grant. So, you know, one of the things that we've exported to South Africa, to Germany, was American white supremacy. But David Horowitz nurtured young Stephen Miller, and one of the things three things he taught him. Number one, how to flip the language of the civil rights movement. So let's take the language, turn it on its head. So we're talking about don't be judged by the color of your skin, but by the content of your character. So let's use that to invalidate any program that tries to establish quotas or even keep statistics that are racially based or include affirmative action that's intentional, because now you're judging a people by the content of their, or the color of their skin. So how to intentionally flip the language of the civil rights movement and use it the opposite of its intention, to win the messaging war. But the other thing was to try and dry up all programs and all funding in the advancement of minorities and people of color. It's an explicit strategy to go after any and all funding that aims at elevating the rise of women and minorities. And you see them doing that. And so we know that that is going to be coming, that they're going to try and turn off the spigot just so that we simply can't supply programs. To just don't feed it, as Reagan used to say, don't feed the beast, just let it wither on the vine. So we're going to have to organize and strategize just to access resources. They're just going to try and starve the quest for justice, the fight for inclusion, to starve it. It's going to be a fight for resources. So
we got to organize.
That's going to be the long-range battle going ahead. It has been all along, but it's definitely going to be the blunt instrument that they're going to use in this administration. And I'm wondering our thoughts about, and I know this is fresh for all of us because we're only 9 days in, but we've been dealing with Trump for a long time. I think that our huddling has to do with coming up with the money, because everything has a cost to it. I can wax eloquent all day long, but if a child's trying to go to college, eventually I got to give them a check.
That's right.
Right. I hate to keep saying this, that we've been here before, right? Like my mother tells me stories. My mother's 75 and we're from Chicago. She's from Winona, Mississippi, tells me stories of riding on on my big mama's cotton sack, right? Like I'm not saying that, it's going to get that bad, right? But we've been here before. We're just a resilient people. I'm confident. We are strategists. We are collaborators. We are sophisticated. My grandmother had a 6th grade education, and look what she built, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I am confident that we will figure it out. I'm confident. We came through, and I was a little worried during COVID, but we came through COVID, and many of us didn't make it out. But the ones who made it out, we made it all right. And I'm confident. You talk about the starving, the things my grandmother did with a bag of flour. I am convinced that we're going to be all right. I'm convinced that we will figure it out. Now, I'll never forget, and I'll say this because I don't want to be long-winded, but as an organizer, Chicago, the Congress Hotel had, I want to say, the longest strike in the history of American unions, over 20-something years. And I've seen them every day. Someone's out there, 26 inches of snow, below -15, below wind chill. And someone asked them, how do you all keep going? And their mantra, their narrative, their messaging was one more day. And I just believe that's the energy that we're going to have in this one more day, because the difference between that collective bargaining and this is we have an expected end. Yeah. We know when the date is that this is going to be over. So I hate to sound so unsophisticated in my response that we just gonna figure it out. But that's what we do. We figure it out. We collaborate. We strategize.
We got some questions. We got some questions coming in online, and then after that, ladies, I want you to think about what is it we want to say to the folks in moving to a place of hope. Yeah. Where do we go from here? Where do we start our not reaction, but response? When the doctor applies medicine to you, he's hoping the body responds and not reacts. If he reacts, he got to take you off it. That's right. If it responds, then it's now igniting its own healing powers. So how do we move to a place of hope and initial response? Because if people feel helpless, they feel hopeless. That's right. So what's our agency? What's our self-advocacy moving forward under these conditions? Mm-hmm. But our question's coming from online. Kevin?
Yeah, I do have a quick question. But first, ladies, I have to say, listening to you guys, all I hear is, all my life I had to fight.
You want me to start rocking? I can do that.
No.
Sophia's in the house tonight.
I think you guys actually touched on this a little bit, but it came in, so I have to ask you, how would you address the proposed boycott of Target, where some products are primarily sold in their stores and not available from the individual manufacturers? It seems like a boycott would stifle some businesses while affecting Target's bottom line.
Yeah.
I have a quick response. Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, go ahead.
I have a very quick response. I can remember I was adjunct at a university, and I was working in a master's program, and the students were unhappy with the director of the program. And so it was, cancel culture. They canceled her. And so, and I told them I didn't agree with that. I didn't experience her the way that they did. And as an administrator, with my positionality to administration, my perspective was different. And so they got rid of this person, and this person lost their tenure, they lost their retirement, literally ruined this person's life. But what they didn't realize is that they lost their only advocate for the program. And what do you think happened to the program? Right. I'm not saying boycott or don't boycott. I'm saying that we have to be strategic with these things. If we look at what the Koch brothers invest in, they literally invest in the chemicals of the thing and patent the chemicals and the things that we use day to day. So is the right strategy to boycott, or is the right strategy to create other opportunities and avenues for people to be able to sell their products and make, income for their family?
Mm-hmm. Laura, did you want to say something to that?
I agree. We got to be thoughtful. Mm-hmm. We've used that word strategic a number of times, but what does that really mean? It means understanding what the impact of what we're proposing to do will be and aligning ourselves around, being really thoughtful, understanding it. And you know what? A lot of this activity that sometimes we talk about, they're not bad things, but boy, we wear ourselves out and then we lose our staying power. And where has it gotten us? How have we moved the needle?
Yes.
So I think we have to get really more basic and make some key decisions like betting on each other, right? We're so focused on what somebody else is doing. If we were to look inward on what we can do, lock arms around that, those are the things that we can control. Those are the ways that we can really move the needle together and be really more self-sufficient in a way where we're not so beholden to all these things they're going to continue to happen. And honestly, in some ways, it's independent of what administration is in office. So how are we claiming our power within the realm of what we can do, betting on one another and moving out together? I think that's what we really need to ask ourselves. And that is not to exclude anyone. It is to actually build a coalition of those who want better for our country, better for our communities, better for everyone. That's what the why has been about for 149 years.
Yes. Yeah. You know, before COVID, I didn't have this podcast. This is part of the legacy of COVID. It forced us to communicate in different avenues. I look at television and all the streaming and different things, and it decentralized entertainment. There's a ton of movies out and different things because people were sitting at home all day long and had to be entertained. And so now there's a whole lot of people in the game because the game has changed. And hard times have a way of forcing us to develop some things because we got to survive. Yeah. And so there's always some good that comes out of it, though it's going to come at great cost, no less. But I'm wondering what will 5 years from now we'll look back on this and what was the good that come out of it. It'll be much clearer than it is now because right now it does not yet appear what we shall be. Kevin, you got another question?
Yeah, last one. We always talk about white privilege. Is there any way, or could we ever build black privilege? And if we could, what could be the steps we can use to do that?
There are some of us with access. Will I call it privilege? Sure, we can define it as privilege. We have good jobs, we have nice homes, we drive great cars, we're able to sit at tables and be a voice for many of us in our community. That's certainly, all of that is a privilege. But will we have the privilege and space of power that we're witnessing now? This country wasn't made for us to have that. Yeah. This country was not, this is all happening because they fear that we're getting too close to that power and privilege. And I don't know that I would call it privilege, I'll call it power, right? And the fear that they have that they are losing that power, which they weren't losing it, we were just catching up to a race that we had a 400-year delay in starting, right? We're slowly catching up. We had a long way to go. So I will call it power, not privilege. And the short answer is I pray that we are on this earth long enough to see it because we are brilliant, resilient, work hard. Can we get there? Yeah, but they're going to stop us at every turn. And this is their last-ditch effort to make sure that doesn't happen. So, yeah.
And I don't care how degreed I am, how much money I get to make, how I get to travel, any of that. Because of chattel slavery, we'll never have access to that level of privilege, right? I don't want to say never, but we don't like to say those things because we're always scared about how it's going to land. Chattel slavery, no. because of it. It is because that the depth of white privilege, the way it has almost, it's almost like a genocide, so no. And I'm struggling with the question.
The substance of my MLK addresses this year was that there have been two conflicting visions for what kind of nation this would be from its foundations. We have been fighting and believed and internalized the vision for a multi-ethnic democracy with equal protections, equal rights, equal opportunities under the law. But others have been fighting to maintain a white supremacist, white privileged society. And when you have privilege and monopoly, equality seems like a downgrade. And so, that vision of equality is a threat. There's something they don't want to see us equal, and that's underneath our immigration tension. It's underneath our criminal justice system, and to get tough on crime. It's underneath the partisan redistricting and how putting in place the legal and political framework for minority rule as your population goes down. It's how we talk about 1619 and CRT and DEI. It's about, I don't want a nation where there is equality, equity, inclusion. That's not what I want. I want white privilege, which I know comes at your expense. And so that is the fundamental tension. So I don't think we'll ever have black privilege. I mean, I think we have the privilege of being able to rock and clap at the same time, but in terms of real political empowerment, I don't think you're right. The system was not designed for us to have privilege. I'm not trying to gain privilege. I'm trying to get equality. That's morally correct. But I don't want one-upsment on somebody else. I want a level playing field and equal opportunity to be able to use my gifts to the fullest, to be protected by the law.
That's right.
And fulfill my dreams along with everybody else. Lori, why don't you jump in here on this?
Yeah, I think if I could just take a step past the question you just asked, and if I would take this group, the people on this call, I feel like I've gotten to know you a little bit, Desiree, and I know Michelle, I know Pastor Braxton. Our goal, even if we had privilege and power, would not be to step in our brothers' backs.
There we go.
It would be to lift everybody up. So, and some people think about power and privilege because they see us maybe getting to where some others are. For me, it's very, very different. Having that power, having that privilege would only benefit everybody. So I think it's incumbent upon us to continue to use what we have, because what we have is powerful. And what we have, we can create privilege on some level. Use it for good. Be the example of how those with it should use it. I think that's our calling. That's our calling.
Along those lines, and I want to close with this as a kind of our final discussion. They've been talking a lot about the pretext, the narrative people put around issues, the lie that they try to make the truth. But some people assume that the blackening and the browning of America means it's declining because they associate might and greatness with white. And you can see it, Ketanji Brown, a Harvard graduate, 20 years experience, generational intelligence. And then they'll fling at her, you're a DEI pick, which even if she was, we've never gotten preferential treatment. We've always had to be twice as good to be considered as good. But when you think about the same people who assume that if a woman's in the military uniform, the military's weaker, then they put someone in charge of the military who is unqualified completely and want to nominate somebody over Health and Human Services who's unqualified completely. Then you want to put somebody in charge of the FBI who's unqualified completely. Because we got somebody sitting in the White House who's unqualified completely. As intelligent, capable, black women who have worked your way to the top off your talent, your integrity, and your merit. How do you experience this moment where they question your competence just because of your color and your gender, and the people questioning it are themselves the poster boy for white male mediocrity? How do you, just in your own psychological space, in your own head, how do you filter that in your spirit?
I'm gonna tell you who blessed me. Constance White. I'm a graduate of Leadership Tomorrow, and I asked her this very question, Pastor. And you know what she told me? She said, my hourly rate is $150. And that's how she wrestles with it. And I thank you, Constance White, for that. And so I say to that, my hourly rate is $450. And that is how I balance that. Because and I'm sorry y'all may hear this to the people who I've worked under, every boss I've ever had has been a cisgender white man who had less education and had less experience. And so my hourly rate is $450. That's how I reconcile that.
Loria, and then Michelle, I want all y'all to speak to this.
I think I'll close it the way we started it. This is not an unfamiliar place. I think we found ourselves in this place from the beginnings of our careers. What I've learned to do is not to be distracted by it. Mm-hmm. I'm confident in what the skills that I have. I'm confident in what I'm called to do. And oftentimes, those things are done to take me off my game. Mm-hmm. And I've learned not to be distracted by it. Mm-hmm. And to be the example for others who are going to go through the same thing. My daughters, mm-hmm. right? I have to be the example for them. I'm not distracted by it, Pastor. This too shall pass. Mm-hmm. This too shall pass.
What saying that would almost be funny if it wasn't real life, if we didn't have to.
it would almost be funny.
But my parents told me always, you have to be twice as good to get half as far. And so I know that it was instilled in me a work ethic and to work hard. I'm not worried about them. But what I also know is that when this all falls apart, guess who's going to be there to clean it up? That 92%.
Yes.
That 92%, that 89%. Black folks have always been the ones to pick up the pieces, to make lemons out of lemonade, to make gourmet meals out of scraps. We're gonna do it again because that's who we are. It's built in us. It is birthed in us from our ancestors who endured far worse. We're complaining now, but our ancestors endured far worse.
Yes.
And we are their wildest dreams. We are here because they endured, they lived. And so we'll make it, and we'll make it brilliantly out of all of this, in spite of the mediocrity that is sitting in the White House.
I do believe that the black woman is the strongest and most empathetic and most moral creature that this nation has created, because she's had to be. She's had to deal with white folks and their stuff, and even the Seeleys had to deal with black men and their stuff, catching it on all sides. And how do you forge a diamond? Put pressure on it for a long time. I'm assuming all three of you have seen the movie 688?
Yes. Yes.
And have you seen that, Loria, the Tyler Perry movie that is surprisingly well written, starring Kerry Washington?
That's Tyler Perry movie.
Watch it. But I wanted to ask y'all, as black professional women dealing with white men who assume they're better just because they're white men, but really are not your equal. Have you had moments in your career where she had to dismiss the chaplain for that so-called sermon and let him know that you are leaving here, And then she had to tell the general over my dead body.
Yeah.
Have y'all had those cathartic moments?
Absolutely.
Yes, Gary Washington. Yes.
Can I ask you this? Did it feel good?
Yes. Yeah.
Those are moments of courage.
Yeah.
Or you just accept whatever the consequences are
Yes.
because
Yes.
you said. Yes.
Yeah.
There is that moment.
Yeah,
Yes.
it for me it was during COVID, but I don't know that it felt good in that moment. It was certainly. I tell people all the time that I mentor, it's going to hurt, it's going to be scary, but say it anyway.
Yes.
Do it anyway,
Yes.
because if you don't, the consequences are greater. And if she didn't speak up in that moment, the consequences would have been greater. And so, yeah, I mean, later you think about it. Well, hey, I got it. Okay, I'm good. I'm braver than I thought I was. I said the hard thing, the scary thing. I spoke truth to power. I threw the rock at the beast. So yeah, it does feel good later. But in that moment, you don't have any other choice.
It has been my privilege to be sitting here on the stage with Sophia's sisters tonight.
All my life.
I want to thank Michelle Merriweather and Laura Yaden and Desiree Wilkins Finch, the present CEOs of the Seattle Vicinity, Greater Seattle YMCA, and the urban leagues of Tacoma and Seattle. There's a lot of brain power on this stage in person and remotely. We got, as Martin King said, we got some difficult days ahead.
We do.
But we've been to the mountaintop. We've been here before. We're going to be all right. And I am looking forward to meeting and engaging with you all in our community, as we will surely do, in Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, huddle after huddle, to make it happen, put Band-Aids on it, and splint the wounds and move forward, because we can't stop now.
That's right.
I really appreciate you all taking the time, near and far, to be a part of it and to encourage our community. Any last inspirational bursts to the folks before I sign off, Loria?
I would just say support leaders who are standing in the gap right now. I say support my sisters who are on this call, Michelle, Desiree. They put a good face on it. I'm telling you, they're putting a good face on it. It's hard. Mm-hmm. Support them. Support those who dare to stand up in this moment. Mm-hmm. And you too, Pastor. I mean, you're out there doing the work, and it's not easy. So let's get underneath our leaders who need our support now more than ever.
I agree. Desiree?
You know, I am no Bible scholar by no stretch of imagination, but in Leviticus, it talks about the law, the protocol was to when you're harvesting your land, I think they call it gleaning, to leave a little bit on your edges, for the foreigner or the neighbor, the passerby. And so, that's what we have to do. We may have to withhold a little bit, sacrifice a little bit, so we can leave a little bit on the edges for each other. And so that's my hope, is that we leave a little bit on the edges, not just for yourself, but for the ones that you're in the struggle with. I hope to leave a little bit for you. I hope to leave a little bit for you, Michelle, and Pastor, I hope to leave a little bit for you, and I hope y'all do the same for me.
That's a good word.
Amen.
Michelle?
And I like to leave with practical things that we can do right now. And I will say, call your representatives, talk to them, tell them how you feel, what you think, what you need, so they can take that to combat what they're up against in Washington, D.C. So let's strategize, build a strategy, and make sure that we're advocating and making sure that our representatives know what we need. And let's prepare for 2027 right now.
Absolutely.
Right
the midterms.
now.
Yes.
The midterm election right now.
We got to get with Brother Jeffries and make sure that we take back the House of Representatives.
We have to.
But
and there are special elections happening right now.
Absolutely.
So
we've got to come to all levels of government, down to local, and participate. And we also saw
a black pack, so
what local pressure does in terms of getting the president to rescind that freeze on federal spending, because when old white folks started calling their representatives, they backed off that in a hurry. We may be in this blue bubble in the Northwest, but we got cousins in other places, and tell them, if you don't know who your representatives are, get to know them and talk to him as often as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west.
There we go.
The squeaky wheel gets the oil in a democracy.
Amen.
Thank you, ladies, for being here. Those of you who tuned in, we went a few moments over, but we'll see you back here next week, same time, same bat channel. Take care of yourself. Take care of your wealth. Remember the words, the prophetic words of Don Cornelius. Peace and love.
Thank you for joining Conversations with the Pastor here every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. You can also join us for worship
6
service
o'clock.
on Sundays at 9:30. See you then.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. My bad.